Hey everyone, I'm Saavage, and in this video we're going to talk about Incineroar, and also why it's still one of the best and most reliable Pokemon that you can use in Pokemon Champions. And honestly, at a first glance, it might not even look that crazy. Like, you see the typing, you see the bulk, you also see Intimidate, Fake Out, and stuff like that. And you do kind of get the idea right away. But then you actually start using it in doubles, or when you're playing against somebody who really knows how to use it, and that's when it starts to pretty much make a little bit more sense, right? So the reason is because Incineroar is not really one of those Pokemon that wins by being kind of flashy. It wins by pretty much making the whole game feel easier for your side. So it does slow things down, it gives you safer turns, it helps your other Pokemon get into better spots. And that's basically why this thing has the reputation that it does, right? So the first thing to understand is that Incineroar is basically built for doubles. That's really where this Pokemon shines. So in singles, sure, it still can do some things, but in doubles, that's where the value really stacks up. Because the second that it comes in, Intimidate activates, and now both opposing Pokemon are doing less physical damage, right? And that is already really good. And then on top of that, it also has Fake Out. Now this means that you're not just lowering pressure, you're also threatening to take one move away from the turn completely. And in doubles, that matters so much more. So sometimes all your partner needs is one safe turn, right? One turn to attack, one turn to set up, one turn to reposition, and Incineroar is amazing at creating those kinds of turns, right? That's why I think the best way to pretty much describe this is that Incineroar just makes your team feel a little bit better. So it makes awkward turns feel more manageable, and it helps stronger teammates do what they already want to do. Now, stat-wise, you do not really have to memorize every single number to understand why it works. The short version is that it really has a good attack, really solid defenses on both sides, good HP, and also it is slow. And normally when you say a Pokemon is slow, that sounds like a bad thing, but with Incineroar, that can actually help. Because when you use Parting Shot, sometimes being slower is perfect. It means that Incineroar can take the hit first, it soaks the damage itself, it lowers the opponent's attack and special attack, and then it brings your partner in safely after that, right? So if you have a more fragile Pokemon that is hard to switch in cleanly, Incineroar can really help with that. And that's a huge part of what makes it so useful. So it's not just about what Incineroar does when it's on the field, it's also about what it lets the rest of your team do. And the typing helps a lot too, right? Dark and Fire is just a really solid combination. It gives you a good defensive utility, and it also gives you a useful resistance. So it lets Incineroar basically fit next to a lot of different kinds of partners. That's part of the reason why it works so well on so many team styles. Balanced teams can use it, bulkier teams can use it, Trick Room can use it. Even more aggressive team can still get a lot of value out of it just because Fake Out and Intimidate are so strong. So if you're wondering what Incineroar's actual role is, the easiest way to think about it is this. It's basically a pivot. It's a tempo Pokemon. It's not really meant to just sit there forever like some giant wall. It's actually meant to come in, get value, and get back out. That is basically the rhythm. You come in, you intimidate, you threaten, Fake Out. Maybe you click Flare Blitz if the damage matters, and maybe you click Parting Shot and bring in the next Pokemon. Then later you come back in and do it all over again. And that is really what makes the Pokemon feel so consistent, because even when it's not getting knockouts, it is almost always doing something useful. So that repeated value is what makes it so strong. Now, for the build, I still think that the bulky support version makes the most sense for most players. That is the version that really lines up with what Incineroar wants to do best. Now, for the nature, I like Careful, and the reason for that is that it's pretty simple. Intimidate is already helping you deal with physical attackers, and that is on the second that you hit the field. What I usually want to patch up a little more is the special side. I want Incineroar to feel comfortable into special attackers too, and that way it feels more complete, more reliable, and just easier to bring into more matchups. Now, for the item, Citrus Berry still makes a lot of sense to me, because with Incineroar, you're usually not asking, can this thing stay alive forever? You're asking, can it live one more turn, right? Can it get one more fake out, one more parting shot? Can it come in more time and get another Intimidate, right? And Citrus Berry is really good at giving you that extra bit of life basically right when you need it. So now there are other item options as well. So if ground moves are what you are most worried about, then the Shuca Berry is definitely something to consider, and that can help a lot into matchups where earthquake pressure is a big deal, right? So leftovers can also work too if you're playing a slower style and you're trying to get more out of the repeated turns. And then there are always other niche options, right? So you have, well, depending on the format of what your team needs, right? But for a general purpose build, the Sitrus is still one of the easiest and cleanest choices. So for EVs, I would just keep it simple, heavy HP, heavy bulk, a lot of special defense usually. And you can definitely move things around depending on what you want Incineroar to handle, right? So now the main idea is going to be just to make it hard to remove and also easy to keep reusing. Because the longer that Incineroar stays available, the more support that it gives your team. Now for the moves, this is basically where everything comes together. Fake out is one of the biggest reasons to use Incineroar at all. So in doubles, removing one move from the turn is huge. Even when you do not click it, the threat of it changes how the opponent has to play. So that alone creates pressure. Now you also have Parting Shot, and this is the move that really defines the Pokemon for me, right? Because now Incineroar is not just lowering attack when it comes in with Intimidate, but it is also lowering attack and special attack again before it actually leaves, and then it brings a teammate in safely. So that is just an insane amount of value for one move. That is why the cycling actually feels so strong, and that is why good Incineroar players always seem so in control, because they also have Flare Blitz, which is still your main fire move. And I think it matters a lot that Incineroar still has real offensive pressure, because if it did no damage at all, then it would just be much easier to ignore, right? But with Flare Blitz, it can actually punish things, right? It can still hit hard, it still forces respect. So yes, the recoil matters, so you have to be smart with it. The fact that the damage is there makes the whole set feel much more complete. And then for the last move, you have some more flexibility. So Snarl is nice if you want more help into special attackers. Helping Hand is great if you want to support your partner's damage more directly. And then the Darkest Lariat is a really solid dark move if you want strong, straightforward pressure. Throat Chop can be useful too in certain matchups. And then there are other moves like Taunt or Will-O-Wisp that can make sense depending on the team, right? So there is definitely room to shape the set around what you want, but the core of the Pokemon is pretty standard for a reason, right? You want the Intimidate value, you want the fake out pressure, you want the Parting Shot cycling, and then you want just enough damage to make opponents respect it. Now, as far as teammates go, this is another huge reason to use Incineroar. It works next to so many different Pokemon. Physical attackers love it because Intimidate lowers incoming damage, and Fake Out gives them safer turns, right? More fragile teammates love it because Parting Shot helps bring them in safely, and then support Pokemon love it because it helps slow the game down and makes positioning easier. So if you're the kind of player who likes slower, more switch-based gameplay, more control, more positioning, and more tempo, Incineroar is probably going to feel really good to you, right? It just fits that style really well. And also the nice thing is that it is not one of those Pokemon where you need some super weird or specific team around it. It is just broadly useful. And that's why I keep showing up. So now obviously it's not unbeatable. There are things that can punish Intimidate. There are strong water and ground threats you have to respect. And if you run into certain matchups, you cannot just throw it out there with no thought, right? You still have to use it well. But that does not really change the big picture, right? So the big picture here is that for one team slot, Incineroar gives you so much. So it gives you disruption, it gives you pivoting, it gives you defensive utility, and it also gives you support. Then on top of that, it actually gives you enough damage to matter, and it makes the rest of your team easier to use. And that is why I would just recommend it so easily to almost anybody playing champions, and specifically doubles. And honestly, that's also part of why I want to keep making Pokemon Champions videos like this, because there really is still room for more breakdowns, more deep dives, more team ideas, and just more useful info for people learning the game, right? And I also want to build more of that over time. If you're wondering why you should use Incineroar, that's basically the answer, because it slows the game down, because it controls the pace, because it gives your team safer turns, and because it gets value almost every time that it touches the field. So that's the build. If you want the full write-up and more options, it's all up on Saavage.com. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe. I will be covering Pokemon Champions and gaming stuff like this, but also gaming more broadly, tech, and other things that I'm into. So if that sounds like your kind of channel, definitely stick around. I'm Saavage, and I'll catch you all in the next one.
You